The FAIR principles called for data and metadata to be assigned globally unique and persistent identifiers. But what does this mean? What are persistent identifiers, or PIDs? Identifiers are not a new concept. An identifier, for all intents and purposes, is a name given to an individual something, a digital object, online profile, institution, or publication. And like our names give information about us, identifiers give information about whatever it has been assigned to. There are rules about the use of identifiers, and these rules vary depending on the object you are identifying. It is the associated rules which infer meaning to the name and allow for unambiguous identification and citation. The need to be able to refer to something unambiguously, to identify it uniquely, has resulted in conventions or rules for naming, and through those naming conventions, information is captured, leading not only to the naming of the object, but also the classification of it. This is the discipline of taxonomy, and it is as old as science itself. In the digital world, identifiers also follow rules, but the emphasis is on clear and precise identification of an individual object, and the capture of vital metadata which confirms its unambiguous identification. For persistent identifiers, or PIDs, to be minted, or a name assigned to an object or output from a research project, a minimum amount of metadata needs to be provided. The metadata captured depends on a PID, but could include details of what type of object, the owner or author's details, the origin of the object, the funding agency, and the file format. By capturing this information, the chance of misidentification is reduced, and the name or identifier now has some context and meaning. Research is global, so research identifiers must work across countries, technology systems, and scientific disciplines. It should be clear where an identifier came from, and that it refers to one thing and one thing only. For example, you might have a copy of a particular book, but when citing it for others, it wouldn't be much use to refer to it as the red book on the living room shelf, as this is too specific to your immediate and local context. Instead, you would use one of the established citation styles, combining multiple bits of information, such as title, author, edition, and publisher, to unambiguously identify the specific book for others. Similarly, you could use a globally agreed upon identifier scheme, such as the book's ISBN number, which can then be used by anyone familiar with that identification system to look up the book's details. Either way, you have now identified the book in a way that it should be globally unique and work in any context. This is the value of PIDs to the FAIR principles. However, no system is perfect. Persistence of an identifier and the object to which it refers is a function of the service behind it. This means that they will only persist while there is a will and resources available to maintain them. Many repositories issue PIDs, but they themselves are not invulnerable. So to issue a PID, an organization needs to work with a third party who will keep a record of the issued PIDs and the minimum metadata, including up-to-date information on the location of the underlying object. This allows for some redundancy in the system. If the repository folds, the object may get lost or moved, but the PID still exists and will give some information about the object. In this way, PIDs establish and maintain a stable link to, at the very least, a record that the object existed and a standardized description of what it was. The web is like a vast desert. Information and content, like grains of sand, are constantly shifting and reforming into new digital landscapes. A URL may seem stable, but if the owner decides to move the associated content or redesigns their website, it can result in a broken link, and the location of the needed grain of sand is lost. Worse again, the content you get back from a given URL can change silently over time, without any obvious indication of that change. A PID acts as a single point of entry for an object to which it is assigned. It is assigned to the object, not the location. So if the URL, the location of the object changes, the third-party registration agency is also updated. And the PID is connected with the new URL. But the PID attached to the object remains the same, ensuring that where it has been linked to or cited remains actionable and will resolve. While we do our very best to maintain the digital objects to which a PID has been minted for, they are unfortunately not perpetual. Digital objects, just like real ones, get lost, corrupted, or there may be a legal or functional reason why they have to be removed from a repository. Or the repository itself may no longer exist. PIDs allow tombstone pages to be created when the digital object you are searching for either no longer exists or has been removed for some reason. In this case, a broken link is not an option or good enough. It is the responsibility of the registration agency to provide a tombstone page explaining why the content is no longer available. We now know what a PID is. It is an unambiguous identity for a thing and that thing only, and is understood and recognized globally, and there are safeguards to ensure that it will exist long term. But why do we need them? A keystone species is one which can define an ecosystem. Without it, the ecosystem would cease to exist or never develop. PIDs are like this. They provide the links and most basic information. They are the smallest building blocks of a new research network, a more stable, persistent, and transparent network of diverse research outputs, people, institutions, and agencies. While the FAIR principles focus on PIDs for research data, it is with the realization that data is worthless without context. So to facilitate data sharing and reuse, PIDs are needed to link the individual institutions and unique resources together into something substantial and persistent. A PID graph or research network from a single researcher on a single project might look something like this. And immediately you can see the benefit of using stable, persistent, and globally unique identifiers to link not only a complex record of activity, but also valuable and reusable research outputs. The persistence of PIDs makes them really important for the scholarly record. It means that bibliographies used to substantiate or contextualize your findings will not have gaps or error messages. And if you are citing an object using a PID and it goes missing or is no longer available, there will be a trusted record that it existed. By using a PID to reference or cite an object, you are creating a stable link that should not suffer from link rot or content drift in the way that URLs do. But all of this depends on widespread adoption of PIDs. Some disciplines are ahead of the game in this regard, but others are lagging behind. Are you using PIDs regularly? PIDs can help the longevity and security of your own scholarly record without too much work at your end. By depositing data or other outputs in a repository, a PID will almost always be automatically assigned. You can now use this PID to promote and share and build your network. PIDs coupled with the deposition of the relevant output in a trusted repository make it easier to cite an object and to track its impact. Research projects can be big and messy, especially when they run over many years and staff changes. Using PIDs means that even if the project changes or the website is updated, past outputs and contributions don't get lost. PIDs tie together a network of information about a research project in a stable and persistent way. PIDs are actionable and should always resolve, creating a quick and persistent access route to the reference or dataset. And if they don't resolve, some minimal metadata will be available, and a tombstone will provide a reason why. It is this quick access and available metadata which help establish the authenticity and provenance of a research output. Ones which you are probably already familiar with are ORCID IDs and cross-ref digital object identifiers for publications, and DOIs for data and other digital objects. At a very minimum, you should begin using PIDs when citing others. Just like citation formats can vary from discipline to discipline, and journal to journal, so too does the guidance around PIDs. The best advice is to use them consistently for citing research objects such as data and publications, and use them in line with discipline and publisher guidelines. In short, PIDs provide stable, persistent, actionable links to all kinds of digital objects, people or institutions. Using one for your data or publications ensures that it is findable and accessible and citable long into the future. For information about cross-ref DOIs, please contact the core team, and for information about DataCite DOIs, please contact the Research Data Service, both found in UCC Library. Thank you for listening.